So I'm Abhilash Chandel. I'm an assistant professor of precision ag technologies and data management at Virginia Tech. And yeah, I mean, I've just completed my first year of appointment. And of course, I'm new to this project that I got to be part of last year when it all started. And I'll try to take you through all what we are doing as part of this project. So I think I've just mentioned about this. So okay, so when we talk about Virginia, it's agriculture of Virginia is the largest private industry with an economic impact of about $82.3 billion dollars as per the records of 2022. Most of the produced commodities rank among top 10 of the commodities produced in the entire United States. It has being across, being near the coast as well, and slightly being far from the coast. There is a varied ranges of agroclimatic conditions, and that's also one of the reason why there are like extreme situations like heat waves or flash droughts or even flash floods. So that's kind of a varied agroclimatic conditions in different parts of the state. So as we move through these challenges, and the producers, when we talk to producers, because I'm based at a research and extension center, so we do get to interact with a lot of producers around corn producers, soybean producers, peanuts, sorghum, etc. The major concern is how do we cope with this kind of situations, like extreme situations, with minimal technological intervention. I mean, that's like the first pressing point to us. Why minimal technological intervention? So, as we thought of formulating solutions to these concerns, what we narrowed down, and that lied also in coherence with the research work that we are doing, is developing climate smart production management decisions and operations. uh, these decisions or operations, they have to be resource efficient and cost effective, that address producers needs and not just stay in silos with us. And solution, as we move forward, as we progress through this project, of course, leveraging public data, relying on open source analysis and cyber infrastructure, which is also protected, was one of the key points that we kind of narrowed down to, so that it addresses all scales of farmers, and it stays scale neutral despite whatever the farming size is, be it large scale, medium scale, or small scale. So, as we started with our first objective, we wanted to actually understand. Of course, we assumed that what are the challenges with producers because of indirect conversations, but we wanted to get in direct connection with the farmers and producers to understand what is what they are doing as of now, what are their challenges and barriers, and where can we come in to resolve some of those challenges. And what we kind of narrowed down to is like first understanding the barriers. The grower generations means what generation the grower comes from, young farmer or a medium experienced farmer or a very old farmer background. What is the awareness level of what's happening in the technological world or the data run world to promote agricultural production management, data protection concerns. What are the current skill sets? What skill sets do we need to develop for the farmers? How do we translate it to the end users? What is the interest level? What is the farm scale? Because any kind of technological adoption, what we narrowed down to hypothetically, will be dependent on farmer scale, for example. That's the first impression a farmer or producer had. And outreach, are we reaching out enough to convey what the technological evolution looks like, how that is going to be friendly, what is the value of that evolution? These are some of the challenges, and there are many more that we identified or narrowed down. So we tried to address all of these through three-step approach. What we did was we developed some surveys, like online surveys, paper-based surveys, and we used to go to all these field day events, field demonstrations. We connected with growers, requested them, asked them to fill out these surveys. Part two was, after surveys, there could be like a varied range of responses. But as researchers, we want to focus on some of the key pressing challenges as of now, or what needs to be done now, which is in our hands, say. So for that, we did focus group breakouts. And then we also developed some of the use cases of some of the popular technologies, but not really getting down to the nitty gritty at producers level. And the domains that we focused on is agricultural cropping system like field crops, for example, aquaculture food systems, and then the livestock systems. So this is the response rate as of today. We developed three types of surveys. One was for the producers of aquaculture, field crops, or livestock, and one was for the service providers who were actually providing data-related services to these producers. And we also developed a survey for extension agents, the university extension agents, Virginia Cooperative Extension, who are actually sometimes in direct communication with the producers. And this kept on evolving, because first we developed producer survey, and then we realized that we need to have a service provider survey, and then we realized that we need to have an extension agent survey, trying to make a comprehensive understanding of what is needed and what's happening and where is the gap. That is the core idea where we wanted to start off with and not assume anything from our side. So we had 100 responses till date from producers' side. We covered 24 counties and 5 responses from service providers, and the survey is still online, and it can be viewed through these QR codes. And jumping on quickly to some of the key survey findings, we wanted to understand what is the diversity in production systems. So about 28.1% of the responders are solely crop producers. About 9.4% are crop producers, plus they also do livestock. About 9.4% are livestock producers, and about 53% are aquacultural producers among the responders till date. Now, when we talk about farming experience, about 9.4% of the responders have an experience of more than 50 years. About 12.5% of the responders have an experience of 11 to 25 years. About 34.4% have an experience between 25 to 50%. And the maximum, like 44% of the producers have an experience between 1 to 10 years. So most of these producers are young or new farmers who are actually wanting to get to modern day agricultural practices. When we talk about the farming scale, as it's also one of the important component, among the responders, about 44%, what I would say are like very small scale producers that have an income below $150,000 of a gross cash farm income annual. About 18.8% are from $150,000 to $350,000, and about 25% are from $350,000 up to $1 million, and about 6.3% is from $1 million to $2.5 million, and only 6.3 again above $2.5 million. So there's a big gap among the farming scales or the scales of farmers or producers there. And that's what kind of motivated us to think about having customized solutions, or the solutions which are really scale neutral that could be adopted by anyone or everyone. As we conclude from this slide, production diversity, there's a huge amount of production diversity in the state. Majority are young or new farmers, as we look from this data, 44%, and majority are small or mid-scale farmers, as we look through this gross cash farm income. Now, we wanted to know, what is the deployment rate, or what is the deployment status of sensor or any technology in the farming operations. As we see, there are 68% of the responders who said that they deploy sensors or technology-related technology in their production operations. And about 31.8%, about 32% still do not deploy that. And I think that's a significant number to kind of look at. But even this 68.2% can be deceiving, and I'll be explaining that how. So these are some of the common sensors that they have been using. Yield sensors, I think they mostly talk about the yield monitors or grain moisture content monitors on the combine harvesters. Weather monitoring, water monitoring like irrigation systems, soil climate, soil moisture, soil temperature, soil salinities, side scans, sonar, like ultrasonic sensors for some of their operations, specifically in livestock systems, RFID tags for their livestock systems, GPS, global positioning systems, especially in combine harvesters for auto tracking of their vehicles, cameras. They just put this cameras. They did not specify what cameras, multispectral, but based on their responses, we kind of figured out that this is just a consumer-grade camera, mostly which people have in their smartphones, or even consumer-grade drones, for example. Then on aquaculture systems, of course, these are some of the most common sensors: temperature sensors, water pH level, uh, dissolved oxygen, salinity, turbidity sensor to just keep a check on water quality for the aquaculture or fish farming. So that's the deployment status. Now, we categorized, again, the next part of the question was categorizing the responders into two parts. Farmers who actually deployed sensors or data technology in their operation, what was their knowledge comfort and what was their operation comfort. As we look through this data, the knowledge level, it was 40% who had like moderate level of knowledge for the technology that they have deployed. And of those, like 20% have like slight knowledge, 20% like very good knowledge, not at all 14%. And extremely, they feel that they have the entire knowledge about the systems that they are deploying. It's about 6.7%. Now, interestingly, not at all to moderate is like 73%. So what it tells us, they have deployed the sensors and technology, but the 73% have a very minimal basic level of knowledge of what sensors or what data they are deploying. And when we look at operation comfort, of course, there's a reason why we divided this into two, because people who might have knowledge might not operate, or people who are operating might not have the knowledge as well. That could be like two-way reactions. So as we see, about 40% of the responders said that they are moderately comfortable operating the technologies that are deployed in their farms. About 20% slight, very much comfortable, about 26.7%, not at all 6.7, and extremely 6.7. So what it tells us, not at all to moderate is like 66.7%, that there's still a lag in operation comfort level, which is like 66.7%. And as we conclude is, some farmers operate without knowledge as well, as we have to draw in nutshell. And what it indicates, maybe they're not able to extract full potential of the data, and they're not aware of what exactly is happening to their data and all those consequences related to data protection policies. They're still not aware of it if they do not have knowledge. That's what we kind of drew one of the conclusion. Now, among the farmers who have, or producers who have deployed sensors or technologies in their operations, as we see data collection and handling, what are the typical categories of devices that they use? So about 21.4%, they just use their smartphones. If there are some applications, there are applications available that you just take a picture and try to tally with some on the database, and then you get to derive some kind of information of what is your crop suffering from. There are a lot of applications there, but how trustworthy are those? They are still in question. So about 21.4% people are using smartphone devices. About 25% they use wired systems and manual data collections. If some grower is highly passionate and if he has so much time, they just install sensors, connect a manual data logger, they download that data on SD cards, and then they take it somewhere to their crop consultants, or if they feel that they are skilled enough, they just try to look at by themselves. Wireless acquisition, this is mostly when in the combined harvester operations where the data is getting collected through the sensors, and it is sent to the cloud of the company system like Climate or Ag Leader, for example. And about 39.3%, so they do not handle or collect the data. What it tells you, they have installed or they are using systems or sensors, they are put in their fields or farms, but they're not collecting data. So they're not really extracting the value of it and why they are collecting it. Just for the sake of it, we don't know. Now, that's the thing. Despite deployment, 39% do not collect any data. And despite advancement, the wireless modes are underutilized. You see that 14.3%, we're like in the world of wireless. But even when you look at the soil moisture sensors, they're still mostly, the ones that are mostly used are wired ones. So limited access, a lot of wire lengths, and they just obstruct on-farm operations. I mean, I'm myself, in fact, is suffering from that problem because the wireless sensors are very expensive. So now the next thing that we are going to work on is making those sensors wireless, how wirelessly the data could be extracted or collected so that it doesn't interfere with operations on ground. That could be one of the hindrance to why producers might not choose to put some of these kind of sensors on ground. Now, looking at the data usage, like purpose of the data collection. So most of the times they use historical data that is coming from their yield or combined harvester. They use it for planning harvest for the next season. They use for variable rate fertilizer and spraying application. Now, this is kind of a slight, you know, assumption-based operations, what I would say as a researcher. They have the data, like combine harvesters get the yield data from the previous season, for example. They try to understand the spatial variability, and then they kind of suggest that this should be the variable rate application at different site specifics within the field. But is that complete enough? Me as a researcher would slightly doubt that, because there would be a different agroclimatic situation in the next season or the following season. That data is not really crunched out or is not being used, and that's not known. So all this analysis, like variable rate application, they are based on historical yield data or crop data that has been collected. And most of the times, they want to look at spatial yield assessment, but that's also from historical data. They are not interested, or they might have not tried to understand if they can predict yield before time. But most of the time, they assess spatial yield for insurance support purposes. That's what they indicated in their responses. And none, so they do not even use, about 18%, they do not even use data for anything. It's just collected, it's just staying there in some of the servers, cloud servers of companies or wherever it is. So as we conclude from this chart, despite data collection, 18% do not use it, mostly used for spatial assessment and for insurances purpose. And about 47% of data is effectively utilized, but mostly based on historical years. So about half of the data is just staying there and not really put into real use, as we realize the power of data and the data science. Moving on next, now the second category was the farmers who have not deployed sensors or technologies in their operations. When we wanted to know about their knowledge level, so 57.1% they said that they are not knowledgeable enough to use or operate those technologies or sensors, and about 42.9% say we are kind of on the moderate side. So, and when we look at operation comfort, there is still some percentage that people say that they might not have knowledge, but they are comfortable operating it. So there is still it does not add up. You can operate things without having a knowledge. Maybe you're not extracting the right potential, or it might, face a backlash somewhere. Who knows? Moderately, 14.3%, not at all, 28.6%. So there are people still who are, who are having some level of operation comfort, but they are not deploying it. What would be the reason? That's what we are trying to determine in our first stage of the problem. So as I say, farmers are knowledgeable, even have operation comfort, but they still do not deploy sensor or data technology. Why? So, then comes the most important question, why, to some extent. What are the producers' concerns with current technology development? Most of them say, like 33.3%, they lack training. They do not have information of how to use data, how to use technology by themselves. They do not feel confident enough. There are hindrances to it. They have some kind of perception as well. And that's one of the reasons why 33.3% of the responders said that they lack in training, and why they are not using, or they are concerned about this part of technology deployment. Privacy and security, yes, people have started talking about it, but it's still 13.3% only. And this is based on response from both, like people who have deployed sensor, who have not deployed sensors. And privacy, security, like data protection, getting weaponized. These are some of the concerns, but only 13.3%. So they might not have entire knowledge about what's happening in the world as of now. cost 26.7%. Some of the most recently developed or evolving technologies are kind of like very high in cost. And talking about Virginia, where almost more than half of the farming or producer community is among small scale to medium scale range, they are concerned about this. I mean, for an example, I was in a technological expo event about the ag technology, and I was trying to present about drones and applications of drones and the data decisions. The most important, the first point that came to their mind is that we are small scale growers. We are not confident how things will do, and if our crop fails, we are in the huge backlog. So there are like these kind of barriers that we wanted to understand, and getting regular technological updates. Most of the growers, of course, we do publish extension articles, we do write blogs, there are LinkedIn posts and everything. But still they feel that the technological updates are not reaching them in the format that they want. What we concluded from this is we cannot be thinking from our perspective. We need to get down to the producers level and talk in those terms. And that was one of the gap that was highlighted by the producers. So, of course, majority are small and mid-scale producers, as in the state of Virginia, and why we see these kind of numbers. Solutions for the cost side, of course, maybe open source using public data can bring down that cost. Cyber-secured platforms that are easy to understand and operate. So skills are needed to understand, interpret, access, and those kind of features are needed, and that information needs to be translated through technological demonstration, how we build up confidence among the growers. So this is that was part one, where we did the surveys and thing. Then the next part was narrowing down to what we can do as of now, moving with time ahead. We conducted a focus group meeting with limited number of farmers, but trying to get farmers from different backgrounds. So this is a depiction schematic of how we conducted that. First, we had like 11 producers who showed up. We divided them into two groups and asked them. We did not influence them. We did not mention a single word about what is the technological level or advancement. We did not even talk to them. We just said that this is the structure. We made them sit in two groups and asked them identify the challenges related to this. What they narrowed down, they highlighted like a lot of challenges. And then in the next stage, what we did, we narrowed down to top 5 challenges in today's time as we feel. And then we passed those challenges into 3 groups, which were again part of those 11 folks. And then we asked them to discuss and list down possible challenges and the solutions to those 5 major challenges in their terms. What do they want? Where is their comfort level? How can we change their perception? What is their current technology acquaintance level? What is they want from researchers like us? What is the role of sales side of the company? What is the role of extension agents? Those kind of things. And then at the end, once they narrowed down to the potential solutions, we again asked them to vote for all the challenges that were listed. And this was done all together by 11 participants. So this is a slight glimpse of how we started with. We initially started explaining about what is the structure and what is the goal of the focus group event that we conducted. And this is the last stage where we asked all the producers to go and stick their vote to all potential solutions. And then we kind of get on the most preferred solution as of now. I mean, of course, it might not sound very high level thing for a researcher point of view, but of course for the producer's comfort, that's the most important thing, and we didn't want it to miss that. So some of the key challenges that were highlighted, they tended to be very specific. For example, the soil testing data not handled in usable formats. What this kind of made us think that they want to understand soil data, their field characteristics, but the way the data is given to them, they cannot really, change anything. They cannot really modify it as per their understanding, and they might be comfortable using that data in CSV or Excel format. That's a very basic example that they gave us. So having that data in usable format, the format in which producers can actually interpret and then take decisions. That was one of the concerns highlighted. They were very upfront in saying that companies are good at sales but poor in tech support. So once the technology is solved, they face like really hard time to kind of get behind the company to kind of solve any kind of problem that they were facing. Limited updates, communication on technology evolution, as I mentioned, they feel that there's no sufficient information getting to them on how technology is developing, what is some of the most useful technology for them that they can be taking up. Limited data protection, of course, as I mentioned, they are starting to get concerned about data getting weaponized. With all the geopolitical situations across the globe, they've started thinking about it. Data handling, value, and usage, they still have hard time in understanding. Of course, there's a skill part to it, like how to handle and manage data by themselves, how to realize the actual value of data, and how to actually put that data to use. Farmers or producers are not interested in high level numbers. They want decisions at the end that they can implement to their operations. So data to decision conversion is rare or limited. High cost and infrastructure requirements. I mean, if you want a wireless technology that is dependent on internet and the farmer does not have an internet connectivity in his farm, I mean, that's a very big setback for technology developers when we talk about data or cloud data accessibility. On-farm connectivity, explicit training and demonstrations are limited and not available. So of course, we conduct field days, but those are still might be in the fashion of how we used to conduct them like 15 years ago. So I think there's a need to change the way these events are conducted. The top 5 voted challenges that we thought of narrowing it down, or as per today's concern, or what we can alleviate, is limited updates or communication on technology evolution. So that comes to consumer engagement, having proper communication channel, demonstrations, validations. Data handling, value and management, authentication. They want to gain skills. They need to be trained on how to use or even understand, have a basic understanding of their data, how to extract the exact value of their data and put that to use in terms of crop or management decisions. And authentication, they need validation reports. Is the data or the sensor or technology that they are using, or we prepare any models, or anyone gives them a models and gives them a tool, they want an authentication or validation to it that this is a right one. Because they have highlighted that tech support, later on they have had hard time with companies. And that's a fact that we wanted to present, as they mentioned. Training and demonstration, of course, there has to be a very explicit way of how every year or every 2 years we change the way how we communicate about technological developments. I mean, the way we did it like 15 years ago or 10 years ago or even 5 years ago might not stand true in today's time, specifically when there are mostly new farmers or young age farmers. Cost and infrastructure support, of course, that's one of the big challenge that was narrowed down to. So these are, on the stage 2, these are some of the identified potential solutions to the 5 narrowed challenges. Updates on technology evolution and developments. Their suggestion was, how about having a third party to keep up with update or be an early adopter and tester? Farmers or producers, they don't want to be early adopters and testers. They explicitly mentioned it repeatedly because they don't want to put themselves into risk. They want someone else who has tested the technology, validated it, and then kind of having a validation report, then they want to use it. After which, there could be refinements of the technologies based on the first person's testing. Non-absolute technology for a decent time. So they are also concerned that they put money to some technology which just, say, expires in few years from now. How about the value of that? Correct information from sales and service departments. They have specific concerns about how things are being dealt at company level or sales point. Data handling, value and management, and authentication. They want to be part of data ownership campaign. Of course, the number voted is less, but they want the transparent use of it. They want to know what is actually happening to their data. They've started thinking along those lines. They don't just want, of course, the end product, but they are also interested to know what is the process applied to the data that is collected from their farms. Learning from early users and create more decisions rather than storing data. I mean, as we have seen through the pie charts, most of the data is getting collected and not getting used. People are installing sensors or the data is not getting collected. So there are already resources in place, but it's not being put to value. And the value is like getting or developing more decisions rather than just giving them numbers. On-farm connectivity and data protection, they need better commercial cell network availability, of course, if we are talking about more tech savvy or data savvy tools, because of course it will demand internet connections on the farm, which is still a challenge for entire United States to solve. On-farm rural connectivity, publicly or privately owned or government-owned networks, at least that helps them to use some of these technologies. Data protection framework and software and producer discretion. I mean, they need to know what is actually happening. They should be asked. They should be asked, like, what is going to happen with their data, what they are, because right now it's, I mean, the most basic situation that they explained was that then when they go to the web page of a company where they sign up for data sharing or data collection, it's written in very small letters, and they don't even have time to read that. Just because they get fascinated at that point, they just select I accept to the terms and conditions, and that's it. But now they feel that there has to be their involvement in whatever is happening with their data. Training and demonstrations, they want dedicated precision ag field days and trials, data related, technology related trials that are also in collaboration with dealers and service providers. If dealers and service providers work with the university, they feel that they can trust it more. And reach out to grower trials with worthy and needed information. So as we keep on developing information, we should not be waiting, and as per their suggestion, we should not be waiting for a field day to happen next year. Immediately, if there is something that is trusted, well developed, it has to be disseminated. Of course, we do that through extension articles or blogs and tweets and LinkedIn posts, but I think they still lack in some communication channel that they think of is more appropriate for them. Last, cost and infrastructure support. I mean, if there's any technology that is high in cost or is quite costly, they want, if there is a possibility of having cost shares or state or federal support. USD has started doing this. Virginia Tech recently got an $80 million grant where they are giving it to producers to install or use technologies and sensors in their operations. So that's one of the steps that is happening. Get insurance providers involved in these operations at every step, so that if there is any risk, they just try to kind of overcome that problem. Incentivize early adopters of new technology. That was one of the voted point as well, because if we give rewards to them, they can be more receptive towards first time use of technology. So yes, this is in summary of that focus group. About 26% voted on data handling, value and management authentication, training and demonstration 24%, on-farm connectivity and data protection 19%, cost and infrastructure support 17%, updates on technology evolution and development 14%. So there is good amount of number distributed to all of these challenges that were highlighted. And as we conclude, on-farm connectivity remains a major issue in technology adoption as they voted it. Producers trust university-developed tools and need dedicated trainings and trial engagements so that they can develop confidence. Producers are reluctant to adopt new technologies and prefer third-party testing and finished products. That's what they voted for. Less votes on data ownership. Of course, there's just two. It's a slight number. People have started thinking about it. But less votes on data ownership and protection is concerning, indicating knowledge and awareness gaps. And at the end, of course, they would be happy to receive any cost share, federal support, insurance support for adopting. And just last part where we are trying to use some of the very famous drone technology. Farmers know what drones are. Now we are trying to show them if there is a value to their commodities, what operations they are doing. So this is a very basic example. We wanted to start with basic. This is a very basic example of how a multispectral camera on a drone can help them determine what is the infestation level, nematode infestation level in soybean fields. How can we map that? This is what they want, like a variable rate infestation map, so that they can channelize their inputs in right amount in right time. Of course, this is the path through which this can be obtained, but this is trying to show the feasibility of derived vegetation indices and how that relates to infestation level. and how this vegetation again can determine the effectiveness of the treatments that they put for the control. So this is one case study for nematodes in soybean. This is the another case study for another popular Virginia type peanuts that are quite popular. It's about Sclerotinia peanut, where we tried to show that how a Sclerotinia severity can lead to significant decline in yield. That's what the first information that we wanted to pass, and how vegetation indices can actually detect or map the level of severity of Sclerotinia blight. That's a very prominent disease for the peanut growers. The next was about in the corn. That's also one of the most important commodity, the leaf spot in corn. And this is like a feasibility to show them that there's a value in the technology that they think is not is popular, but it can also provide them value. Of course, later in these steps will come about having more machine learning, deep learning algorithms to get into higher accuracies. But this is sufficient to show as of now that there's a feasibility and value to drone-based multispectral cameras in there. And one of the most important case study was about determining peanut pod maturity. Peanut grows below the ground, and it is like indeterminate in nature. So as far as the conditions are favorable, the peanuts can continue to flower and produce pods. But what is the optimum time when they should harvest? It cannot be determined based on, like similar to other crops which are visible above the ground. Peanuts, of course, are produced below the ground. And the process to estimate the maturity level is just getting 3 or 4 plants from the middle of the field, remove the pods, wash them through pressure washer, and count them, and count the number of different colored pods. And based on that, they just estimate, like assume, like apparently that 3 weeks from now, these pods will be ready to mature. But that's just based on one sample. So growers are interested in technologies that can produce like lot of decisions in less amount of time, and that's why we use these drones and try to use some of the machine learning algorithms just on drone data. Of course, there has to be an agroclimatic side added to this that will further improve the accuracy, but we could get up to 76% accuracy. So this is trying to show the value of some of the technologies that they feel is popular, but it is also valuable in terms of decision making on ground. So, of course, producer engagement, smartphone applications, we do like demonstrations and developments. I wanted to show this in particular because this is the data that came out of combine harvester, but this was not given to the grower. We took it from a company called Chandel. We put this into maps, and then the grower was himself surprised of looking at the variability of data. So data putting it to actual use or interpretation. So yes, conclusions, we want to focus on these 3 things: regular updates and awareness, work on open data and protected data handling frameworks. That's our project team, so thank you very much.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Ben Jewell. I'm an extension educator here at the University of Nebraska, and we're going to talk here a little bit about our subaward here for this particular NAPDC. So joining me today, I have Darlene Knipe here from Market Maker, the National Market Maker Program, and I'm going to have Dr. Dave Lamy come up in a little bit from Clemson University and talk a little bit about our project. But just so you're kind of give you a little background here, we are focused on the specialty crop industry, and so we have been working on a subaward for the last year or so to kind of take a look what are the data needs, gaps in the specialty crop producer world. And so this will be a nice kind of follow-on with the previous presentation because we have some pretty good overlap there. So we were kind of really looking at what are the kind of those critical decisions that producers are making in the specialty crop field. What are their data needs and gaps, and what sources of data do they tend to trust? And so just for a little bit of background, when we're talking about specialty crops, USDA defines specialty crops as fresh fruits and vegetables, tree nuts, dried fruits, horticulture and nursery crops. So this includes everything from fresh fruits and vegetables to Christmas trees to nursery production, bedding plants, all those kind of things. So it's a very broad domain. So a lot of different data needs across the system there. And just to kind of give you a little bit of a sense of what we're talking about 243,000 specialty crop farms in the United States, according to the Ag Census, but that covers about 435,000 producers. And so 60 million acres in specialty crop production in the US, this is 2017 census, and about a third of that is from orchard production. So 5.6 million acres in orchard, about 4 million in vegetables, and another 4 million in pulse crops. And so when we were talking about specialty crops, we kind of, it really runs the gamut in terms of scale of production and things like that. So if you think about a citrus farmer down in Florida, these specialty crop producers tend to operate more like a commodity producer here in the Midwest. You're kind of tend to be focusing on 1 to 2 kind of different products. large-scale production. So a lot of these kind of farmers tend to have their own consultants. They have crop agronomists who come out and help them with their data collection, with their data analysis. They have some of those resources at their disposal. We recognized pretty early on that there's this kind of subgroup of specialty crop producers who are direct-to-consumer kind of producers. They're marketing directly to the consumer. They have this whole extra layer of data needs that really doesn't get attended to as much as we would like to think about. So there's the whole kind of world of production data that's needed, all the agronomics, everything genomics and things like that, that I think is pretty common across domains. But when you get to these specialty crop producers who are selling directly to consumers, there's this whole world of marketing data that is really, really critical for them in their decision making, but where there's a huge lack in data availability and accessibility. And so this is kind of, we are targeting primarily thinking about these folks who sell directly to the consumers, whether that's through farmers markets, CSAs, other kind of marketing channels. But just to kind of give a snapshot of that, about 147,000 farms in the US sell directly to consumers in some capacity, about $9 billion in total food sales. And about half of that, a little less than half, is sold through institutions like schools, hospitals, universities, and such like that. So some particular kind of data needs in this group of producers. So within that space, I'm going to bring it up Dar Knipe here, who, with her founding partner here, Rich Knipe, Market Maker has been working in this data space for about 20 years. So I'm going to let them talk a little bit about how they've approached data management, collection, and sustainability in the specialty crop direct marketing world. And then we'll talk about our project a little bit.
Wow, you did a good job. I'm going to try to talk as fast as you, Ben. Yes, I'm Dar Knipe. I'm one of the founders of Market Maker. I don't know how many of you are familiar with this program, but I would say that we're here largely because we've sort of had this in the trenches experience with trying to develop an information infrastructure. Let's see, which way do I go here? And which one? To the right. Just a little bit of background. So I'm not sure what order these slides are in, so I'm going to have to read it along with you. This was started at University of Illinois in 2004, thanks in partnership with NCSA at U of I. Rob here is a part of that organization. But what I think is worth noting is that this particular system was developed with the cooperation and collaboration of 21 different land-grant universities. So I come from extension background, as does my husband. We really valued that system and saw its unique ability to contribute to the development of this infrastructure because, as was discussed in some earlier presentations, there's a large aspect of socializing technology and information usage that we see extension and the land-grant system playing a unique role in. We also work with other partner organizations collaboratively to support the program. They contribute financially as well as in kind. Some of our partners include USDA, Farm Bureau, Farm Credit, Farmer Veteran Coalition, really a long list of organizations that all have a shared interest in developing this data, largely around market channels. Maryland Department of Ag was one of the most recent additions, so it's a very eclectic mix of partnerships. What is it's a different slide? Yeah, okay. All right, so anyway, we're going to improvise here. It's mission-driven, it's web-based mapping platform, so we take a lot of data. We're working from scratch here. We've developed a system where data didn't exist. We collect it, we curate it, we disseminate it, we add value to it, and so there's a lot of geospatially referenced data. We make it free to everyone. So the reason for that is because we'll barter for data. You know, we want that information. We want to be able to aggregate it and centralize it. You can also think of it as kind of an eHarmony for farmers because we're linking up farms and businesses with market opportunities. By the numbers, we have about 39,354 registered farmers and businesses, over 60,000 detailed granular profiles about their operations, covering 931 products. And then in addition to that, this is where this is confusing, then we augment that with 2.4 million additional business profiles on businesses in the food supply chain. So we have granular data, but then there's also the opportunity in mapping the infrastructure to get cursory data on other businesses that are in the food supply chain. Lots of traffic. We get about 213 profile views. Richard, a year? Is that the... Okay, so that's from 2022, 213 profile views, about 483 searches, people trying to find each other in products, and 1.4 million page views. So this is the data that we work in. So we have our primary data where we collect farm and business data from registered market maker members. It's mapped and you can search it by characteristic. The detail that we collect is what we determine to be important characteristics that drive market opportunity. So when you talk about best practices, that your hope is that it will attach a premium to that particular product, that has to be found in the marketplace. So we feature that information. That's the granular data that we collect that we then allow to be searched for on our platform. But then the secondary data sources are all the businesses in the food supply chain by NAICS. We have census data, labor of consumer preference data, and we have the ability to import other secondary data. So there's a reason why we're collecting this primary data and all of this secondary data for different stakeholder groups that we serve. And I hope there it is. Okay, good. So in the course of our 20 years, we've identified 3 clusters of stakeholder groups that we need to engage because this is actually an information ecosystem. So in order for us, and there's a symbiotic relationship, so every one of these clusters are groups that we work with, but it's a different value proposition. And so we have to incentivize their participation by understanding their needs around this data. So we have the farmers and the enterprises. They want to find each other. They want to access markets. We've got the analyzers, the researchers, the policymakers. They have an interest in that aggregate data and mapping infrastructure and being able to understand, where are there gaps in the food supply chain? Where do farmers grow, certain types of products and, certain types of best practices, and where they're engaged in what parts of the country. And then we have the partner organization. Those are the trade associations. They are the boots on the ground, the grassroots organizations that have those trusted relationships with the farms and businesses that we want to engage for data purposes. And so we have to develop a value proposition for them as well. So we provide data administrative tools. We provide them low to little cost technology that makes it worthwhile for them to participate in this information ecosystem. So that's what our network looks like. This is our basic infrastructure. Every one of these nodes is an organization that is a collector of the data or a disseminator of the data. And all of that data then pools to the central database, which is housed in the cloud. And our job is to digitally connect all of these data puddles. We found out that people are really fond of their data puddles. They don't want to give them up. They don't want to participate exclusively in our lake. So somewhere along the way, we found out that digitally connecting all of these little subsets of information by engaging in a value proposition that makes these organizations want to contribute is what really makes Market Maker work. I'm hurrying. This is an example of an Illinois network. So there's multiple organizations, didn't used to talk to each other, all competing for the same data. Farmers couldn't keep up with all of the information requests, so we harmonized all that. One profile gets shared amongst all those different organizations. So this is basically what drives our data structure. And it's really, our footprint grows based on the relationships we have with organizations that have an interest in this information. Biggest challenges, we have to constantly be assessing the needs of our stakeholders. Technology keeps changing. Even though data's free, even though we make the information free, farmers still see a transactional cost with keeping that information current. So it's one thing to collect data, that's a yeoman's task, it's way harder to maintain it. So, and I think you can all read this, how are we doing for time? Trust and security, a lot of the challenges that we face are the things that were talked about yesterday. And then more importantly, once you create this system, developing some sort of a long-term sustainability model. It's a little like, I've noticed that USDA funds a lot of projects where it involves developing a database. It's a little like bringing home a puppy and then finding out you've got to feed that puppy when it turns out to be a Great Dane. So we've kind of got a Great Dane here, and that's over 20 years we've really tried to refine the process for the long-term sustainability of this information. Because now we have a massive amount of data that never existed before, and we feel a real duty, we're duty-bound to make sure that that data is out there long past my husband and my involvement in this project. I think we're fine. I think if you have other questions about some of the methodology that we've discovered and find terribly effective, look us up afterward. I want to get back to Ben so he can talk about the project and some of the work that we've done as a group.
Great. Okay, thank you. Appreciate that, Dar. Let's see. Uh-oh, looks like we got it in here twice. How did we do that? Or am I going backwards? There we go. All right, so for this particular project, we kind of wanted to build on all this great 20 years of experience in the specialty crop direct-to-consumer marketing, data collection, and curation experience. So we started by kind of compiling a list and sort of reaching out and interviewing key informants in the industry. So these include university and extension specialists, USDA researchers, Farm Bureau and other private partners, private consultants. We transcribed all the interviews. We did thematic coding, multiple rounds of thematic coding, et cetera. We also held a focus group with a group of key informant experts at a conference in Florida back in November. And so really it allowed us to drill in on the kind of themes that were coming out of the interviews that we were having. You can kind of get a sense of who those folks were, those key informants we interviewed. You know, one thing we would point out immediately, and we've pointed out before, is we haven't done a great job, and we think there's a lot of opportunity and need to really diversify who we're speaking to in these particular interviews. So we, university researchers, and we kind of ended up with a group of mostly white men, and we would advocate for a much more diverse audience of informants and key experts here to kind of broaden out the data that we have. We also held some producer focus groups, so we held 5 focus groups with specialty crop producers across 3 of the regions that Dr. Clark showed earlier, 25 specialty crop producers, same kind of thing. We explored the transcripts with thematic coding, and we'll talk about some of what we found here right now. And so this kind of got mentioned in the previous presentation, some of this, so this is a great sort of just kind of reinforcing what's already been heard. You can kind of see the main themes here. Our specialty crop producers, and I would argue producers at large, they're not consumers of raw data. And so this is a real challenge if we're collecting a whole lake of data and we're putting it out there in an Excel spreadsheet for people to download and look at. This is a really daunting territory for producers in general. There's some access issues around data, and we'll talk about that a little bit. I'm going to go kind of quick here. We found that peers are a really critical source of information for a lot of specialty crop producers. So when they need information about a particular production method or integrated pest management or whatever the case might be, a lot of times they're going to call their neighbor down the road and say, what the heck do you do with this, right? And so as a researcher, as university folks, how do we sort of leverage that trust in peers to kind of disseminate data better or find new tools or new methods for getting information out there through these peer networks? We feel that intermediaries such as Extension, others are really critical to add value to the data that's out there. This is what Dar was talking about. So as we get this data, and I think this came up in the previous presentation, there really needs to be some work and some investment on the front end here for folks like Extension to really understand the data themselves, to produce visualizations, value-added tools, decision-making tools, et cetera. But of course, to do that, we need to equip our Extension folks to do this. I'm going to go kind of quick here. Kind of covered this a little bit. There's what we found in our interviews and our focus groups. Just a lack of comfort, lack of experience with working with data, just a lack, just training, just the comfort level is just not there. There's also kind of a pretty heavy distrust of how the data is going to get used. If we share our data about our production costs or whatever, and it's going to go to the USDA, how is that going to come back to us? What sort of implications does that have for me as an individual data provider? A lot of them are hesitant to even report their farm income. So you got to have all this whole world of issues around data collection generally in this particular producer group. And I don't think that it's necessarily unique to this group of producers. We found really clearly a kind of pretty clear distinction between large-scale specialty crop producers, and I kind of mentioned this already, and our small-scale kind of direct-to-consumer marketers. Your large-scale specialty crop producers can typically afford someone to act as a crop consultant, a data analyst, someone who can kind of do this data and analysis work for them and help them drive their decision making. Our smaller scale folks just do not have this capability, do not have access to this data. We don't have equipment with sensors on it. When we talk about data lakes, this is just not something that exists in this kind of smaller scale direct-to-consumer production system. So some real issues there around data availability, data access, et cetera. This just kind of highlights that. This is a quote from one of our key informant interviews talking about these larger scale citrus producers, basically just making the point that they didn't get where they're at because they shared all their data with everybody openly and freely. So they've been very protective of that for good reason. A little bit on that peer-to-peer sharing sort of model, particularly with these short supply chain producers. They rely on those peers for many key decisions. Some of this is about trust. Some of this is just about a lack of data accessibility, or they just don't know where to go for the data. So some real heavily investment in relationships across the supply chain that really kind of drive a lot of information sharing and decision making. Just another quote that kind of highlights this. When we talk about value change, this is kind of like investing values and relationships into the food supply chain. I've kind of mentioned this already, so I'll go kind of quick, but we really see a huge need for intermediaries to kind of step into this data lake as they exist, to kind of do what some of what Market Maker has been doing for a long time, to really kind of take this information that's out there and create value-added products. One thing that came up over and over again from producers who were talking about it is they can find things like enterprise budgets for specific crops. They can find some production yield data or expectations on certain things, but they can't find it tailored to their specific region. They can't find it in a way that matches, maybe they're doing greenhouse production, maybe they're doing organic production. So these variations on different production systems, there's just not the readily available data that would help them at their specific geographic location with the type of production system that they're using. So. And then, of course, if we want Extension or others to kind of fill in these gaps and kind of play this role as an analyst, as a consultant, we really need to equip them with skills and training to do that. We found that a lot of folks find Extension in universities to still be very trustworthy sources, so I think they would turn to that kind of information if it was coming out of a university system. But we don't necessarily equip our Extension folks with the knowledge of how to work with that data themselves, particularly around these kind of local and regional food systems, which is kind of a new area for Extension to really be spending a lot of time in. So, and then there's kind of still that opportunity there for those peers, those very influential peers. This came up quite a bit. If we can identify who those folks are, work with them to equip them with the right data and information that they can then, as influencers, be kind of spread into other producers in their industry. So I'm going to pause there. That's just kind of a very brief rundown. I'm going to turn it over to Dave here, who's going to talk a little bit about next steps for this particular research.
Hello, everyone. So some of the potential future directions that we saw with this project is to do more online surveys. We've been in the focus groups and interviews and kind of getting a good sense qualitatively of what's going on, but sampling issues and that sort of thing. We don't know if we have results that we can use across the board with good scientific validity. So we're going to be developing some online survey instruments that we might be able to use to get more data, actual hard data to kind of share and inform our decision making. We want to better understand what decision-making tools are out there already. We mentioned enterprise budgets, for example, but I know that their availability and their quality is really spotty across the country. I know from working with farm management people in my own state who work a lot with specialty crops that there's always a struggle to get that work done. And there's always a struggle to find ways to collaborate across states and that sort of thing, unique institutional arrangements to get that work done with quality. But it is quite important if we're going to use the data that we collect in meaningful ways and we want to influence decision-making by producers, we got to have those kind of tools out there for extension agents and specialists to use. And the idea of if this peer-to-peer learning is so important, then maybe we should be leveraging that more with creative programs within the extension world and involving others in that as well. identifying the resources that are already out there and making them available, more available, maybe through things like e-extension and other mechanisms to get them into the hands of the people that are going to be able to make effective use of them. So I got a couple of diagrams I want to show you. I'm not going to go into great detail here, but just to kind of lay out a little bit of some thinking that's going on. This is a little diagram that's going to come out in an e-extension, actually Journal of Extension article here. I think they said July or December. They don't know yet, but you're getting a sneak preview here of some surveying we did, and this is around IPM. How are these different levels within this system? And I got to thinking about this. Looks like multi-level marketing, if you will, but it's within the land-grant university system. And so you've got the researchers, the extension specialists, the agents, the growers. In some versions of this, we have crop consultants thrown in there about at that agent or specialist level. But this system and the flows of information and the trust and that sort of thing that occurs, some producers may want to access researchers directly, but it's kind of rare and that sort of thing. So we tried to go out and survey and understand kind of who people were trusting, who producers were trusting. And it came back pretty solidly that they are trusting that local extension agent still. In a state like South Carolina, we still have a presence in every county with an extension office. We may not have all the specialties there. You go into a state like Illinois, they don't have that same presence. So where specialty crops exist, and maybe some of these other crops, the more the commodity crops that are where you're trying to get them to make effective use of the information we're gathering, some of those linkages are broken and missing. And there's even a generation of producers out there right now that probably never had the experience of working with a good local extension agent, and so they don't even know that sort of possibility exists. So something to pay attention to. Perhaps there's some reason here for backing some extension development, if you will, some advocacy. One of the questions that comes to mind to all these producers when you're working with them is, what should I grow? And I've been working with a Southern Heritage Crop Project, which is all about heirloom crops in the southeast of the U.S. that have some kind of historical or cultural connection to the region. And so in order to answer that question, what should I grow? We were looking for a framework, and we went all the way back like to the 1950s, I think it is, for Porter's Competitive Forces Framework, which is what you're seeing up here right now. And we're trying to integrate that into our Southern Heritage Crop Project, which is kind of here at the center of this. And this is mainly dealing with all the marketing considerations that are there, all the kind of competitive positioning of this new crop, or should I continue growing the one I've been growing all along? All the questions that come to the fore. It's complex. And we don't know necessarily for every one of these if we can generate a data source that will help them to answer these questions clearly. But we're trying to lay this out so that they're at least conscious of these issues and factors that either they're taking consciously or unconsciously into consideration. They matter, some more than others perhaps, and to begin to align information resources where they are available with these kind of key considerations. And I put this out in front of New Crops for the Southeast Conference a few months ago, and they really liked this approach, because how many, over the last 30, 40 years, some of you are old enough to know this in the room perhaps, how many of those crops, those kind of fad crops or fad livestock enterprise opportunities do you remember? Can you name any of them? The ones that showed up and disappeared like within a few years, sometimes with people making poor investment choices? How about Jerusalem artichoke? Do you remember that? That was in Indiana when I was there, when I was a kid. There's a lot of people planting them for about 2 years. We recently had flax down in South Carolina. Emus were another one. A lot of those things, if you come back and you look in here, you'll find why they aren't here today. So that's what we're trying to do, is avoid some of those situations where people are growing things that just don't make good economic sense because they're not thinking through these things. But also, more importantly, maybe to, besides eliminating some of those things, to try to help them better target really good opportunities for increasing their sustainability and livelihood. And I think that's all we have, right. So it's more than just radishes, even though that's all you've seen today.